All right, so right there you can see with just that little bit of time, I have a lot of the body hollowed out. Now, my measurements I know are not even there. I haven't measured anything yet. I know I'm nowhere near the bottom of this yet. But real quick, what I can do with my scale here, I can check to see where I'm at. And what I like to do is I like to leave about 3/16 of an inch on the bottom. So I have 3/16 on the walls, 3/16 on the bottom. I've seen some before that go down to 1/8. I just like to stay on the safe side with a little extra material down there in case you know, people do take these in the woods. So there's a chance, you know, they might hit the ground or whatever. So I like to leave a little bit extra material, and I think the sound still stays fairly good. So, you know, these are right around 3/4 of an inch right here. And looking at this, I've gone about 1/4 inch deep. So what I need is, I'd like to take another 1/4 inch off. I know I have a little bit farther to go there, but that can be kind of fine tuning it. And then we'll see where we're at. All right, now I have the body plunged to depth, and the striking surface platform is the depth I need it to be. I do need to kind of just true up that inside wall there in the actual body of the call. And for that, I'm going to use my skew. Super sharp. It'll get in there, leave a real nice surface, and just trim that last little bit that I need to get off that inside. The other thing I need to do is adjust the height of the platform for my soundboard. Right now it's sticking up pretty high, so we just need to take that a little bit lower to get that to where where it should sound fairly good. I'm going to use the skew for that as well. All right. Let's take this out and see what we have now. As always, if we have the chuck key in the lathe chuck, we never take our hand off that while we're working. We don't want to accidentally forget to leave that in. Turn that into a missile in the shop. Now, you know, obviously, I did not check that earlier. I just used a piece of slate. But inside calipers were good. I haven't been so worried about my OD here because I know that I still have a decent amount that I need to clean up. You can't really see it, but there's a little spot here that the saw just kind of cut in. No way really around it, so we're just going to kind of work with that for right now. The one thing I am going to do, though, and it's something that we don't do a whole lot at school just because it kind of depends a lot upon the person who's actually doing the setup for this. And I don't like to just let people do this. What I'm doing is, because I've had sometimes, every once in a while, a bowl has come loose on the lathe, and I don't, or possibly broken apart. We're actually expanding the jaws inside this, putting a little bit of pressure from the inside. What that's going to do, that's going to allow me to come and clean the outside up, and it's going to allow me to do my little bit of shaping on the bottom that I like to do. Now, for this last part on the side here, I'm just going to bump this in again. So I have that nice and flat. I can still feel that there's a little bit of unevenness. That must be from my saw cut. But I'm going to start to do that little cove in the center, like I talked about that we were doing. So, what I'm going to do here, very lightly, I'm just kind of coming in and doing that scallop. All right, I have that in there. Looks fairly good. The one thing about using a burl like this, and we've run into this in the shop before, and we usually solve the problem with a little bit of super glue, is that sometimes there's a lot of times parts of a burl that are a little bit soft or punky just from, you know, how the tree grew or how long it's been sitting, if it died. I'm running into that in a couple spots. And not even so much how soft it is, just because of the grain reversing so much, I'm getting a little bit of tear out, but it's nothing too serious right now. So I'm going to cut the bell of my sound hole with that. So I have that bell cut. And the next thing I'm going to do basically is just a setup for my little bit of a hollow that I like to put on the bottom. It's hard to see, but I put 2 pencil marks. It's kind of a target. I'm going to move the camera a little bit closer so you can see. You can see those 2 dark lines kind of spinning there. All I'm going to do is put a little bit of a hollow in there, just mostly more of a design feature than anything. So that looks really, really good. It's going to look a lot better once we get finish on it. But basically, I'm ready for pretty much my final step before I put the thing together and drill my last few sound holes. And that is doing a little bit of sanding. Tool rest is out of the way. I don't need that in there as a place for my hand to get pinched in. And I'm just going to start out with a little bit of, this is actually like a 320 grit. A lot of times I might start a little bit coarser, maybe like a 150. But I had nice sharp chisels, and they didn't really do too much damage, like tear out or anything. And that's due to the fact that I did have them so nice and sharp. So I'm just trying this 320 paper, very, very fine grit, just to see how it does, and if maybe I do need to go a little bit more coarse to get this kind of cleaned up for the end part of it. You can see my hands, even though they are fairly close to the lathe, the jaw here, the chuck, I'm making sure that nothing is really close to what's spinning. I have my hands out of the way there. My sleeves are, like we said at the beginning of the video, rolled up to keep myself safe. And I'm just trying to work. You see it slipped a little bit out of my hand. I didn't have a super tight hold in the paper. Nothing's pulling me in towards the lathe. And like we always say, I'm not leaning on the lathe here. You can see my arms on top of the headstock, but I'm not leaning on it. Okay. I'm going to take a little time, clean the rest of this up, and we'll be back once we kind of have that where I want it. All right, so I just finished getting that all sanded. Pretty much got all those tear out marks out, and that paper actually polished this surface up fairly nicely, so it's kind of hard to see what was done. And as far as the actual woodwork, cutting, sanding, anything like that, we are actually done. I still obviously have to drill the rest of my sound holes. There's a little bit of hand sanding that I need to do. There's some, I can see a little bit of rough edge in the inside of that sound hole just from the drill bit where it kind of went through. I'll spin that on the sandpaper. And I'll actually come from the inside as well, just to make sure there's no last small little bits of splinter in there. Anything that would leave like a rough edge. That's great. So I'm going to lay out for the holes on the bottom side, get those drilled, and we should be ready for finish. Alright, so got my holes drilled. We're all set. Now usually I go with a 3/8 diameter hole for my outer holes with this. I decided tonight to do, instead of just 6 3/8 holes, I went with, just for something different, 8 1/4 ones. We'll see how that sounds, just to try something different. Now, a lot of times what I use is a spray lacquer for my cauls, just a couple coats to just kind of seal them up. I try to stay away from just like a oil a lot of times. I like to do a little bit of a different finish, like a lacquer. I use oil for a lot of things. It's just I've never used oil a ton on these. I don't have any lacquer, to be honest with you right now. So what I'm going to do is I have a little bit of polyurethane. We're just going to leave it sit overnight, and tomorrow we'll get the glass and slate glued in. So I actually, to get a little bit of detail, I just cut a piece of a foam paintbrush off. And what I'm just going to do to start with, I'm going to start by just brushing a coat on the inside just to seal that up. Now the one thing I do want to make sure I try to do is I really don't want any on the surface where I'm actually going to be gluing in like the slate or the glass. I want to try to leave that bare wood so that the I'm going to use a product called Goop to glue that surface down. But I do want to try to, and that Goop will actually help seal the wood. Everything else though, I'm trying to just get a little bit of polyurethane in there to basically just provide a little bit protection against the elements. And like we talk about, seasonal movement of the wood, this will provide a little bit of protection. We always talk in shop, you can't seal wood 100%, but a little bit of finish will help mitigate some of the effects of that seasonal movement. So for right now, I think we're going to let that sit overnight, and hopefully tomorrow we'll be ready to go with actually putting the slate in and seeing how it sounds. And you can already see that that burl is looking really nice with that polyurethane soaking into it. We'll let it just sit here overnight, and in the morning, or whenever it's dry, it is a little bit cold in my garage. That's the only thing about putting finish on, at least at this time of year. Once it's closer to summer, it'll be quite hot in the garage. We're going to let that set. Make sure the lid's nice and tight. And we'll get back to this tomorrow and hopefully get this finished up.